So how we're going to do this? We want to touch on 4 subjects. One is the animals themselves and the conditions in animal agriculture. Second is health. Third is the environmental impact of animal agriculture. And fourth will be the spiritual aspect. We're going to go back and forth. I'm doing 2 of those subjects and Kojin's doing 2 of those subjects. And we're going to time each other for 10 minutes each. So we won't go on forever and ever, as we certainly could, because there's just so much, so much to cover. But we will try to make it brief.
I'll let you know at about 8.
8 would be good.
Okay, I don't need that. I have this.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with the animals themselves. I think that the majority of us, whether we come into it, sometimes people do come into these dietary lifestyles through the health aspects, but I think ultimately the majority of us really are in it for the animals. I think that is ultimately what touches our heart and draws us to a more compassionate lifestyle. And some of these things are hard to hear, and I apologize for that, but it's also very important that we bear witness to what's happening with these animals, because it's behind closed doors. No one knows what's really going on, and it is absolutely horrible. So there's millions of animals at this moment tightly confined, and when I say this, I'm talking about all of the animals, really, land animals that are raised for our animal products, as well as dairy cows, egg-laying hens, pigs, turkeys, all of these. So tightly confined, horribly treated, living really miserable lives, and they are brutally slaughtered for meat, dairy, and eggs. This confinement is, a system that's come into play because of numerous reasons. It's more economical, more just easier for the farmers to deal with, as well as there's just so many animals now because there's so many people eating them. They're confined in these really tight pens or cages. If you can imagine yourself in a crowded elevator, and you know how uncomfortable that is. You're kind of like up against the other people, and you're just really can't wait to get out of there. Imagine that being your entire life. That's all the space that you've been given to live. And that's how these animals live. It's miserable, absolutely miserable. They're mutilated in all kinds of different ways, dehorned, castrated, debeaked, detoed in some cases, all without anesthesia. These animals never feel the sun on their bodies or their feathers. They never feel the earth under their feet. They live completely unnatural lives in these windowless warehouses where the stench of ammonia, they're defecating and urinating right where they are. They can't get away from it, and the stench of ammonia from the urine is so overwhelming. The workers have to come into these places with masks and goggles because it's so intense. Yet these animals have to live in there 24/7 their whole lives. Very short lives, though. Most of these animals are slaughtered at 6 months to a year old. That's about it. They're babies. So they're all babies. They're brutally slaughtered. They go kicking and screaming and fighting to their slaughter. If dogs and cats were treated the way farm animals are treated, the farmers would be in prison for animal abuse. There are laws against this kind of treatment of dogs and cats. However, the animals raised for food are exempt from these laws, and it's behind closed doors. No one knows. And little by little, we are getting to see what's happening. I really encourage you to watch video. I mean, I can talk all day, but really seeing it for yourself is it's difficult, but we have to know what's happening. We've got to be aware. And so now we're having a lot of undercover investigations coming out. People, very brave activists that pose as workers, go into these factory farms and will videotape secretly what's going on. And some of these videotapes, it's so brutal, you just can't even imagine. I mean, not only all those conditions that I just talked about, but then also the people that work there are just so cruel to the animals, so cruel. There are such horrible, horrible things that I have seen where they just kick and stomp and, you know, punch, actually literally punching the animals. It's really horrible. So, you know, and again, like I say, don't take my word for it. There is video out there to see. How much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. I did want to talk a little bit about the dairy and veal connection. I'm sure everyone's heard about veal, and you know, that they're, again, it's the baby cows, very tightly confined. They're chained at the neck, not able to even turn around or lie down comfortably. It's really horrible, and most people that have heard about it, and they know and recognize, oh, you know, veal is just terrible. I would never eat veal. That's one of the worst. And it's true, it is. However, where do all those veal calves come from? They come from the dairy industry. They are the male byproduct of the dairy cows. Of course, dairy cows have to be kept pregnant their entire short lives to give milk. Okay, and that in and of itself is very unnatural. They wouldn't be pregnant every year of their lives, and it really is very intense on their bodies. So when they you know, go through this intensive process, their milk output wanes. They are sent to slaughter very early. Dairy cows go to slaughter in the equivalent of their teens, maybe 2, 3, 4 years old. So, and they're slaughtered for ground beef. Dairy cows do not have a retirement plan. It's not, you know, it's not profitable for them to keep them. They've got a surplus of baby females. But the baby males, what about the baby males that come out? They're not of the same species to be raised profitably for meat. So they're the Holstein cow, so it's just not as profitable to raise them for meat. So they've come up with this veal. The veal industry, basically. So, you know, it's interesting when people say, oh, I'd never touch veal. Of course not. You're absolutely supporting the dairy industry. They're one and the same, you know. So dairy supports veal and vice versa. There's a similar thing with egg-laying hens. I do want to talk about that briefly as well. Again, egg-laying hens, one of the worst of the conditions, these tight battery cages that they live in. But at the hatcheries where they hatch the babies, they're in these big drawers. The eggs are in these huge just drawers, heated drawers. When the little chicks, you know, peck out of their shell, the very first thing that happens at the hatcheries is they're sexed. The females are thrown on one conveyor belt that goes back into the egg-laying, you know, that they will go and be an egg-laying hen. The males are, again, not of the same breed to be raised profitably for meat. They're not a broiler chicken, which is the ones that are raised for meat. They're a layer chicken, so they're disposed of. They're a byproduct of the industry. We're talking hundreds of millions of male baby chicks. As soon as they hatch out of the egg, they're thrown on a conveyor belt and go to their deaths. Horrible deaths. Sometimes they drop into grinders and are ground up alive. Sometimes 2 minutes. Sometimes they're put into garbage bags and will just be alive, like put into huge garbage bags and just thrown in the trash to suffocate on their brothers. It's a hidden atrocity that the industry does not want you to know about, and it's horrible. And this is for free-range eggs and dairy. This is for cage-free eggs and dairy. I mean, this is, you know, across the board. So, and with my last 2 minutes, I will definitely touch on the free-range and cage-free thing. There's all different ranges of, you know, of horrible. But unfortunately, it's not that much better, cage-free and free-range. Most cage-free eggs, they're still in windowless warehouses where they never go outside, they never, you know, they're still debeaked, they don't see the sun, all of that. And they can call that cage-free or humane. They're just feel-good labels to make you feel like you're getting something, you know, that the animal has been have had a happy life, and it's really, unfortunately, most of the time, 99% untrue. So my time is up. There's just so much more. This is just a touch of this subject. So I really encourage you, please, to check out on the web videos and more information. So.
Any particular website?
Well,
IDA.
yeah, well, and In Defense of Animals is who I work for, and we have our Farm to Animal campaign, and there's numerous pages of all kinds of information. Mercy for Animals is another really good one for videos, for the undercover videos. They do a lot of the undercover video exposure. Meet Your Meat is a short video that is very intense, let's say that. So thank you.
And the worst part about it is none of this is necessary at all.
Right.
There's no reason in the world biologically that we need to be eating animal products. The two main points that I'm going to talk about here is vegan health. And the two main points that I'm going to drive home right now is that reducing and cutting out your intake of animal products will reduce your risk for almost every different chronic degenerative disease that's plaguing our Western nations. And second of all, that there is no nutrient that you cannot find in a superior source in the plant kingdom. Basically, animal products are made out of plants. The animal had to eat the plant to become what it is. So there really is no nutrient that you can't find, and what I will argue will be a superior source in the plant kingdom. So to start with the first point, there's many reasons why animal products will contribute to chronic degenerative diseases. And what we're talking about, I'll try to get into cardiovascular disease and cancer. I'm not going to have a chance to get into bone disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's, and I mean just all these plethora of diseases. The risk is increased by your intake of animal products. And if you're reading any kind of scientific literature, a lot of the times, like if you go on the American Cancer Society, American Heart Association websites and start reading, time and time after again, their mantra will be, and eat less animal products, eat more plant products, increase your intake of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. So veganism really becomes, or vegetarianism becomes, a logical extension of very mainstream dietary recommendations. It may be radical societally, because you're going to be different than mostly everybody else, but in terms of the science, you're actually very, very conventional, very conservative even. You're just literally taking the mainstream recommendations to the whole way instead of just part of the way. So basically, if you look at nutritionally what makes up an animal product and what makes up a plant product, you'll find that a plant product is a very holistic food, where an animal product is a fragmented food. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you can get all the nutrients from plant foods, but you can't get all the nutrients from animal foods. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of nutrients that are just simply not found in the animal kingdom. And there you have a principle called displacement, right? So the more animal products that you eat, the more you're displacing the more nutritional plant products out of your diet. So if you're eating a steak, for example, that means that you're probably not going to be eating X amount of calories in terms of plant, and that's going to have a more holistic nutritional profile. The animal product tends to be very high in saturated fat, and fat in general. It has no carbohydrate. Mainstream recommendations are to increase your intakes of carbohydrate from whole grain sources, not from white refined grain sources. Animal product has no phytochemicals. Phytochemicals are various different micronutrients that have incredible potential for fighting off and staving off disease. Absolutely absent in any animal product. And they have no fiber. Right? Fiber is one of the main things to reduce your risk of digestive cancers, and also it pulls the cholesterol out of your body, so it also helps with the cardiovascular disease. So animal product is a fragmented food, right? Versus a plant product. What does the plant product's nutritional profile look like? Phytochemicals, antioxidants, fiber, carbohydrate, not to mention all the vitamins and minerals and everything else. It's all completely present there in the plant product, right?
And protein.
And of course, protein. I would love to get into our nutrients of concern and reassure your conscience that there is no nutrient of concern that you can't get from superior source, but that's down the line. First, we're talking about disease. Okay, so basically, if you're eating a plant that has a lot of antioxidants in it, it's reducing your risk of cancer. Right? If you're eating an animal product that doesn't have any fiber in it, you're increasing the risk of cancer. So therefore, what the conclusion of this is that an animal product is a risk factor for chronic degenerative disease, right? It doesn't mean that if you eat a steak a week it's going to kill you, but it does mean that the more animal product you eat, the more likely you are going to be statistically to get disease. And this is reflected epidemiologically too when you look at vegetarians and vegans that have much lower rates of all these diseases and statistically on average live longer, up to 7 years longer than the general population of omnivores. So therefore we can conclude that animal products have an increased risk of disease and vegans and vegetarians have a decreased risk of disease. Okay? My next topic that I'd like to talk about is nutrients, nutritional. Basically, any nutrient can be found in a superior source. And the reason I'm saying superior source is basically the same bottom line, right? When you're eating your calcium from cow's milk, chances are you're getting a lot of saturated fat. Not many people use non-fat milk, but that's out there. But you're definitely not getting any fiber, right? So you're eating it in a source, and it's going to have a lot of protein. Oh, by the way, nutritional recommendations from National Institute of Health and Sciences is to moderate protein intake. Moderate, not eat more protein. The problem is America tends to eat 2 to 3 times too much protein. And the problem with protein is it has nitrogen in it, which creates ammonia, uric acid in your body and puts a lot of strain on kidneys. And kidney disease is one of your top 10 causes of death. So therefore, the National Institute of Health and Sciences is telling people, eat less protein. But if you go pull somebody off the street and say, what nutrient is most important to you? What are they going to say? Protein. Got to make sure I'm getting my protein. Well, I can rest your conscience that you're getting 2 to 3 times the RDA of protein. Almost everybody's getting well over the RDA. As a matter of fact, John McDougall has challenged people to try to design a diet that has a sufficient amount of calories but not enough protein. It's almost impossible to do. I mean, with the exception of some random people over in Africa who eat nothing but wheat subsidies for 20 years on end, and then they get kwashiorkor, which of course is protein and energy malnutrition disease that's most common worldwide that we've never heard of. Kwashiorkor, anyone? How about cardiovascular disease, coronary heart failure, pulmonary cancer? You've heard of all those, right? These are our meat-based diseases. So basically, 2 very, very, very simple points. I could go into other things. One thing I would like to talk about. One thing I would like to talk about briefly is a couple nutrients of concern, right? In terms of nutrients, first of all, I'd really, really encourage. Oh, this is one thing I really want. My wife came up with this. This is brilliant. What she does is she does what's called superhero days, and it caught on to me too, right?
I didn't come up with that. Alicia Silverstone.
Alicia Silverstone came out. I don't know who that is, but
in her book, The Kinder Diet.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay. Anyway, so what it is basically 5 days a week, totally pure. All right. Fruits, vegetables, cut down as much oil as you can. Try to use a little salt and condiments and things as little as possible. All whole grains, all fruits, all vegetables, all of that, right? 5 days a week. 2 days a week, allow yourself to slip up a little bit. Allow yourself to have a dessert, on Friday or Saturday night. Allow yourself to have pizza or something, soy cheese pizza. So this is the kind of the way of eating that I really, really advocate. And I think because if you look at it, if you have like a pizza on Friday night and a dessert on Saturday night, and then you look at your nutrient intake or your caloric intake, mostly like 99% of your calories are all going to be from really, really good sources, and your nutrients going to be really, really high. And you don't have to be dogmatic and strict. And it's very easy. It'll start to become a habit, and that's really, really, really what I'd like to advocate to people if they can try out Hope's or Alicia's superhero diet.
The Kinder Diet. It's in her Kinder diet.
Anyway, I thought that was really brilliant. But anyway, in terms of calcium, you can get your calcium from your leafy greens, you get them from almonds, you get them from various different legumes and nuts. In terms of your protein, every food has got protein. RDA for protein is 15% of your calories are from protein, right? Almost everybody's hitting around 20, 30. It's not really that hard to get a lot of protein in your diet. If you look at the nutritional profile of watermelon, 15% of watermelon's calories are from protein. 15% of almost every food is from protein. I mean, it's between 5 and 15. But if you look at the mother's breast milk, right, when you need protein the most is when you're growing, right? Mother's breast milk's around 5% of the calories. So then, of course, there's a question of, well, do we really even need 15%? In the first place, it was figured out to be very, very high. And a lot of our RDIs are shot at really high. So, RDA, excuse me. So, don't worry about the protein. Absolutely not. Calcium, you got it. Your iron, leafy green vegetables, you should be eating some green every day. I'm all about the daily salad, not Davy salad. Throw some broccoli in there. You eat a little bit of steamed greens. Something green every day, and you're going to get your iron. You're going to get your protein, all that stuff. Watching out for things like spinach, parsley, and help me out. Oxalic acid, spinach, parsley, and chard. That's the other one, right? Watching out for those because they have the oxalic acid, which becomes an inhibitor in terms of your uptake of calcium and iron. But according to the American Dietetic Association, we can get all of our nutrients perfectly adequately from a vegan diet, and we can still be athletes, we can still be parents, we can still be children. Everybody can do it. It's not like there's anybody who can't do it. There's this whole trend for people to say, oh, well, everybody's individual, everybody's different. Well, yeah, that's kind of true, but we all have basic dietary needs. It's not like one person's going to be able to live without calcium and another one's not. So a lot of our needs are really very similar.
A leopard and another leopard are the same.
Yeah.
gorilla and another gorilla.
Yeah, I mean, granted, you may have various different degrees of atrophy in your digestive organs, which may mean that you need more of something than somebody else. I mean, that's possible. But last thing I'd like to close with is a little discussion on B12. B12 is the one thing that's considered to be not a reliable source from plant kingdom, and the reason being is B12 is a product of microbial synthesis. It's made by microbes. It's not made by plants. It's not made by animals. And the way we do our conventional agriculture, a lot of the B12 has been grown, or foods have been grown in dead soil. So you're not really getting. It's not that you're not getting it, but it's just not reliable. You can compare two pieces of lettuce. One will have enough B12, another one will not. So we consider it to be not reliable. So mainstream recommendations for almost everybody who's on a plant-based diet is to figure out a reliable source of B12. And B12 reliable sources would be, I think it's like a tablespoon of nutritional yeast. And if you haven't discovered the joys of cooking with nutritional yeast, I encourage you to try that anyway. Also, you can get yourself some fortified soy milk. You know, there's a lot of things that are fortified with B12. If you're absolutely not eating anything that's fortified, anything like that, I would encourage you to maybe think about taking a supplement. But at the same time, that being said, epidemiologically, vegans do not have a higher rate of B12 deficiency disease. We have lower rates of serum B12 that could even be considered in the deficient range in some cases, and we may have more range of that. But when it comes down to translating to actual disease and actual physiological problems, vegans do not have higher rates of physiological problems. B12 deficiencies is almost exclusively from omnivores whose digestive systems have atrophied to the point where they don't produce what's called the intrinsic factor that helps them uptake the B12, and that's the last sentence I'm going to say.
Take a breath. So, yeah, we do Eden Soy Extra. Our favorite soy milk, and the extra one, it's like half a cup is like your whole day of B12.
40%.
Okay.
Well, I believe it's 8-ounce cup is 40%.
What's it called? Eden Soy Extra. You know, Eden Soy is the brand, and it's their extra one because they like supplement it with all. I think there's vitamin D and others in there. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to talk now about the environmental impact. And this is, a more obscure one, not something that we really know a whole lot about, but we're just now starting to hear more about it. Luckily, finally, we are waking up to realizing that we are really destroying this planet, and global warming is here and now, and not something off in the future. So it's really amazing how much our diet impacts. And I have a lot of science here. I'm just going to kind of go through, just because it's really amazing. And I just want to mention that all this science is, peer-reviewed scientific studies. It's not, it's like the EPA and the UN, and so just so you know that I've done a lot of research, and it's good sources of science. So anyway, there's really numerous environmental issues going on with animal agriculture, not only global warming, but we've got water waste and pollution, waste of resources, waste of grain, fossil fuels, loss of habitat, species, and biodiversity. I wish I had time to talk about all of it, but I don't, so I'm going to focus in on some things like global warming, since this is really a very prominent one for us. So there's a new report out by two prominent World Bank environmental advisors, and they have found that animal agriculture actually emits 51% of our greenhouse gas emissions, our human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. 51%, that's over half, coming from animal agriculture and eating animal products. A UN report also found that actually animal agriculture, it contributes more than all of our transportation combined, all planes, trains, automobiles. So when we think about, our global impact, or our global warming impact, often we think about driving, right? Wanting to drive less. Well, guess what? Eating plant-based is actually even better than driving less. So it's amazing. So how does this work? There's, what's going on with that? There's just numerous different aspects throughout the process of animal agriculture. 65% of nitrous oxide comes from human-caused nitrous oxide comes from animal agriculture, and nitrous oxide is 298 times more powerful a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. There's numerous greenhouse gases, as well as methane, another greenhouse gas. 37% of methane comes from animal agriculture, and methane is 23 times more potent a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. There's excessive energy use, fossil fuel consumption, 68% of ammonia, that's a leading contributor to acid rain, also comes from animal agriculture. More than 400 other polluting gases like hydrogen sulfide and, of course, carbon dioxide. Throw in the destruction of the rainforest. Cutting of the Amazon is cattle ranching and raising soy to feed cattle. #1 causes of rainforest destruction. You've got just a recipe for serious greenhouse gas impact. There's also massive amounts of energy wasted in the artificial environments of the slaughterhouse, the factory farm, the processing plant. These are indoor environments, conveyor belts, milking machines, lighting, heating, mechanized slaughter process. Just huge energy consumption. It takes 8 times as much fossil fuel to produce animal food as it takes to produce plant food. 8 times as much. A recent study in the University of Chicago found that consuming no animal products is 50% more effective at fighting global warming than switching from a standard car to a hybrid. Wow. So you don't have to go buy a Prius, just go vegan. And you'll do even better. Doing even better for the planet. Water. I do want to touch on water. Huge impact on water. Most of the water that we use is going to agriculture. Okay, we think that a lot of it's flushing down our toilets and in our showers and watering our plants, and a lot of it is. However, larger amounts are going to agriculture, and most of that is animal agriculture because we're watering the grain that's going to feed the animals, plus watering the animals. Producing 1 kilogram of plant protein requires 100 times more water than producing 1 kilogram of grain protein. 100 times more water. Same amount of water produces 16 pounds of grain or 1 pound of meat. And of course, like I said, watering the livestock, washing all the factory equipment. It's just huge wastes of water. How much water can be saved on the plant-based diet? Meat-centered diet requires 4,000 gallons of water a day. 4,000 gallons. Vegetarian diet, a little better, 1,200 gallons of water. Vegan diet, 300 gallons of water. So a huge water savings. You can also look at it this way: 2,500 gallons of water. Okay, 2,500 gallons of water can produce 100 pounds of potatoes, 50 pounds of fruit, or only 1 pound of meat. So huge water savings. Thanks. I've even heard it said that a vegan can leave the shower running for a year and not waste as much water as a meat eater wasted in that year. So, amazing. 2 more minutes is all I have?
Getting less, yeah.
Oh, geez, okay. I might have to skip the fish part then, unfortunately.
No, you have to do the fish
part.
part.
Well, it's all very important.
No, fish is most important.
No, I think the local and organic and local is very important too.
Do fish.
Okay. All right. Well, so we're really clear cutting our oceans. How we're fishing these days is we're dropping these just miles and miles and miles of netting, pulling up everything in the way, that gets caught in the net. We pick out about 30% to sell, and the rest gets thrown back dead. Coral, kelp, non-target fish species, endangered species, they just all get thrown back dead. So we're really, really devastating our oceans. 100 billion fish are farmed and slaughtered every year. And that's not including the shrimp and clams and oysters, that's just fish. 100 billion, that's twice the number of chickens. All 17 of the world's top fishing estuaries have been overfished. 7 of the top 10 marine fish species are fully exploited or overexploited, and nearly 90% of all large predatory fish in the ocean are now gone. Endangered species are starving without enough to eat. They're caught in the fishing nets and killed, like dolphin with tuna, as well as in the shrimping industry, the sea turtles get caught in the shrimp nets. Similar situation. And here's the real kicker. Half of the world's fish catch is fed to livestock. In fact, more fish are consumed by U.S. livestock than by the entire human population of all the countries of Western Europe combined. What a waste. What an absolute waste. We don't need to be killing those fish or eating those animals.
Time.
Time.
Local. Do local. You can have a minute of mine.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, and I've got a whole nother part that's really important, too. I thought this was 10 minutes. Okay. All right. It's just, there's just so much.
We've done this in 3 hours. We've done this.
Oh, yeah.
We used to do it in 3 hours.
It's so hard to cut it down. But anyway, okay. Local, organic. I have so many people that come to me and say, oh, but I eat organic. I eat local. Eggs, dairy, fish, whatever. Or not fish, but, meat and dairy, eggs. I really want to make it clear the only difference in organic and conventional, okay, is that the animals are fed organic grain and they're essentially drug-free. That's about it. That's all the other environmental degradations that I talked about still apply to local animal agriculture, organic animal agriculture, greenhouse gas emissions, fossil fuel use, forests, water waste, water pollution, topsoil depletion, all of that.
Suffering.
Still apply, and the suffering, of course. And then with local, animal products, local animal products are not entirely local or environmentally sound. It's really interesting. A food's carbon footprint, transportation is only about 11% of the equation. That's about it. The production phase is 83% of a product's carbon footprint, and animal agriculture is really heavy on production. So I'm going to skip such good stuff. Okay.
The food that are fed to animals that are local is usually not local, is what she was about to say.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say, is that it's all trucked in, so there's transportation.
Usually from out of state.
From out of state, yeah. I will read this little stat just to close up the local. A 2008 study in the Journal of Environmental Science Technology found that switching just 2 meals a week from meat and dairy to a vegetarian diet, achieves more greenhouse gas reduction than buying all locally sourced food. Amazing, huh? Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up with these great stats. Here we go. If everyone went vegetarian, now this was a scientist. I can't remember where he was from, but anyway, he did this with vegetarian. Imagine what they would be if it was vegan. Okay, but these are vegetarian. If everyone went vegetarian just for one day, the U.S. would save 100 billion gallons of water. This is one day. 100 billion gallons of water, enough to supply all the homes of New England for almost 4 months. 1.5 billion pounds of crops otherwise fed to livestock, enough to feed the state of New Mexico for more than a year. 70 million gallons of gas, enough to fuel all the cars in Canada and Mexico combined with plenty to spare. This is one day. 3 million acres of land, about an area twice the size of Delaware, and 33 tons of antibiotics. Okay? If everyone went vegetarian just for one day, the U.S. would prevent greenhouse gas emissions equivalent to 1.2 million tons of CO2, as much as is produced by all of France. 3 million tons of soil erosion and the $70 million result in economic damages, and 4.5 million tons of animal excrement, almost 7 tons of ammonia emissions. One day. So, basically, eating vegan is eating green. Choosing a plant-based diet is one of the most powerful things you can do to help save the planet.
Wow. All right, so we're just going to close with a brief talk on spirituality and vegetarianism and veganism. Basically, I'm just going to keep it kind of short, if I can ever do that. My yoga students laugh. Basically, it's an interesting thing to note that almost every religion in the world pretty much places a high value on compassion, right? Whether it be compassion to others, to other human beings, or compassion to each other, or compassion to animals. Most of the world's religions have at least some kind of taboo system against eating meat. Not necessarily don't eat meat, but at least on certain days, holy days, you don't eat meat or you abstain from various different animal products in that regard. So it's an interesting thing to note there. And if I was going to say that one very, very, very central theme in almost all the world's religions and spirituality is compassion. It's compassion. Compassion is a very, very, very important concept spiritually. And I pretty much think that anybody who's spiritually inclined would agree with that. What I would argue is that what is more compassionate than abstaining from killing? Really. It's the pinnacle of your expression of compassion. It's an expression of compassion that you can make 3 times a day. Every time you sit down and eat, you're saying a mantra. You're saying, I'm not killing. I'm not hurting somebody else. I'm not buying into the idea that in order for me to be happy, I have to hurt somebody else, right? So that to me is the essence of enlightenment. That to me is the essence of the spiritual path, is really trying to live for others and live in a way that's going to benefit others and benefit the world, instead of hurting others and hurting the world and putting your needs above others. I'm not very well qualified to talk about Western religions, but I am pretty well qualified to talk about Eastern religions. Back in the Vedic period, the Vedic times, the Vedas were a series of scriptures that prescribed a lot of animal sacrificing and killing of a lot of animals to propitiate the gods. You kill an animal, give it to the god's going to do something in return. Around 600 BCE, there became a rebellion against this way of thinking. And various different schools of thought in India started to really change against this current. They started saying, you know what you're doing with your Vedic sacrifices and your killing of the animals, we're going to call that Himsaka Dharma, the Dharma, the religion of violence. But we're going to distinguish ourselves from that. Instead of violence being the method of our spirituality and our expression towards God, now it's going to be compassion. And from this, various different schools were grown, and you've probably heard of these. Buddhism, for sure, was predicated on 2 really simple things. One of them was compassion. Ahimsa was one of the main things that came out of this. Jainism was very, very important. Ahimsa Paramo Dharma. Nonviolence is the supreme law of the universe. Compassion is the most important law that you can follow, right? And the amazing thing is this led to a vegetarian movement that lasted 2,500 years to this day in India, where a good portion of the population is vegetarian. It spread all throughout China. China historically has been one of the most vegetarian countries in the world. Historically, the Buddhists in China were very, very adamant against eating meat, much more so than anywhere else. The population of Japan, very, very little fish once or twice a week, almost never any meat. There's actually a temple in Japan that was erected, I think, in the 1850s in honor of the first cow that they say was ever killed in Japan, because of, I think it was 1860s, after Admiral Perry came over and the Westerners started coming into an influence in Japan, they killed the cow, and it's very shocking to the people of Japan to have killed a cow for food, So a majority, at least 2/3 of the world's population has lived primarily on a vegetarian diet. It is not to say that they were strict dogmatic vegetarians, but speaking in terms of calorie-wise, that's a very small percentage of their diet actually ever came from meat. So when people say, there's never been an entire culture that's been vegan or that's been vegetarian, well, worldwide, based on spiritual ideas, for the most part, there has been. And this is why I really think that spirituality gets left out of the discussion in veganism and vegetarianism. If you look at the most successful vegan, vegetarian movements, they've been predicated upon spirituality more than anything. So I think it's very, very interesting that we can revisit this discussion and start bringing about these ideas again. One of the basic philosophical ideas that happened in India around 600 BCE was the idea that we would call self-realization, right? And self-realization is a process by which you train your mind to realize that you're not individual, you're not separate from everything else, that you're not an ego, you're not this I am that, in your daily life you think you are, and instead to see yourself as part of an aggregate whole, right? Just the small part of the aggregate whole, and the seed of the whole is within you, and you go within to find yourself, right? And the main vehicle for this is nonviolence and compassion, right? Because through compassion, you obliterate your sense of selfishness. Through compassion, you're no longer putting your needs above somebody else's. You're no longer saying, to be happy, I have to hurt somebody else. You're instead saying, to be happy, I have to help. I have to release my illusion of separateness, right? And that is exactly what compassion does on a spiritual level. And a lot of times when you see various different lists of spiritual principles that come out of India, a lot of times ahimsa will be the first one on the list. And there'll be several other that follow, but the reason why ahimsa is always listed first is because when there's ever a conflict between any 2 different spiritual precepts, you always default back to nonviolence. Always take the path of not least violence. Always take the choice that's the most compassionate. And that is one of the fundamental ideas. And I really, really would invite people to explore that idea in their vegetarianism. And I think a huge change happened to me when I first went vegetarian. I instantly became much more peaceful. And I think a lot of people really do, because all of a sudden I was saying, I don't want to hurt anymore. What does that mean? Radically. I was raised in a very macho atmosphere. In order for me to be cool, I had to hurt somebody else, and that's how I lived. good. But all of a sudden there was a huge shift. Now my sense of being and my sense of of identity revolved around not dominating others, but as a matter of fact, helping others, right? And so vegetarianism really, really is an awesome way of doing that. And that is, I believe, why a lot of different world's religions have these taboos against eating animal products. Okay? We're done?
All right, thank you. Want to open it up to questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I know there's not a lot of time for touching all the areas, but the question always comes to mind is about pet food and the pet food industry. It's got to have a huge impact on the stats you were talking about as well.
Yeah.
But taking it home too, like, what do I feed my dog? You know, it's
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, dogs you're lucky you have a dog. Because dogs actually are omnivores like us, and they can thrive on a vegan diet. They can absolutely do great. I've seen amazing, thriving, old, happy vegan dogs. Cats, it's a little different story. Cats are carnivores, and they need taurine, which is something that is only found in meat. We don't need taurine to survive, and we get it, but we don't need it.
Produce it.
Huh?
We produce it, I believe.
We produce it because we are animals, right? But anyway, so yeah, there's tons of great websites. Vegan dog. If you just Google vegan or vegetarian dog, there's tons of great websites. There's a really good dog food that is mail order called VDog. That's very complete nutrition, the whole thing. So yeah, dogs are easy. Cats are not so easy. We have 2 cats, and it's not so easy.
Murderers.
They are murderers. But I do feed my cats meat because they are carnivores, and I did try. There is vegan cat food, and I did give my cats, not these 2 cats, but some previous generation cats. I started feeding them vegan cat food, and I swear they did not do well. They didn't thrive. I could tell. I could just feel, and I gave it a good try, and I really felt like they weren't thriving. And as soon as I put them back on meat food, I felt like they did a lot better. So
one of the cool things about veganism is it's really it's a choice, right? It's something, we're omnivores, which means we have a choice, we have an option, right? Not everybody has this choice. Cats don't have a choice, they have to eat meat. So that's their dharma, that's their way. That is the way. You don't condemn a lion for eating antelope. It's fine, it's great, that's what they do. It has a place ecologically. Also,
I wish the mice that are like around our house rather than us having to
Yeah, we got mice for sure. But also, it's I would say that in certain contexts, I would say that eating meat is even justifiable for humans. But we're nowhere near these contexts. If you're an Eskimo, good luck growing your vegetable garden. You know what I mean? And also, there's various different places in the world where you just decreasingly so. Like now, you can get pretty much vegetarian, vegan food anywhere. But if you're from an indigenous culture where there just wasn't that option, it's not like we condemn that, or anything. But if we have a choice, and then this great question everybody always gets: so if you were on a desert island, and then the second you concede that you would probably hunt and kill a rabbit, then all of a sudden people feel justified in eating their meat, and it's like no, we're not on a desert island.
Right,
so,
we're in a first world smorgasbord of vegan food. So
as long as you have the choice.
Exactly.
Also avoiding the meat meal in any pet food, because anything can be a meat meal. So read the label and avoid meat meal.
What do you mean?
Meat meal can be anything, like old meat.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
At stores,
Yeah,
all of it goes into these big vats and gets put into pet food. So
there's definitely different levels of good pet foods. Yeah, for sure.
Even roadkill gets put in there, so avoid.
Oh, roadkill is probably. Yeah.
That's more ethical.
No problem there.
I don't know too much about the topic, but what's this about blood type? They say, well, you're the hunters and gatherers, but that person should eat.
Can I have
this
it?
And that, do you know anything about that?
Yeah. It's a nutritional fallacy. It's not even a fallacy. It's a fiction. It's a complete fairy tale. It's he's not a doctor. He's a naturopathic doctor, which is a huge distinction between a medical doctor. And they actually teach this stuff up at Bastyr, which is a naturopathic institution. But this stuff is based on no science at all. I can get really into it if you want to. One of the things that he says is that this thing called agglutinization is going to happen if if you eat the wrong blood type, what's going to happen is your blood cells are going to start clogging together, and they'll do these things like these live cell analysis where they take your blood and put it on a slide and then put it on a projector, and they say, oh, see, you've been eating wheat, your blood's clotting up. Well, guess what? Blood and air, it clots up, And the funny thing about this is that really, if this was really what he says, it would be like the main cause of death in America, because how many, type O's are eating, wheat and eating vegetables. Nobody's eating what they're supposed to be. So it would be literally the main cause of death. It would be all over the nutritional journals. It would be everywhere within the mainstream scientific community. Unheard of. Pretty much every main health organization has totally denounced this. You can go on to Tufts University, they're really neat. They analyze all these fad diets and they say, oh, well, this one on a scale of 1 to 10, where is this one? Eat Right for Your Type gets like a 0. Dr. Atkins gets like a 3. Zone gets like a 3.5, or whatever. I'm not really sure. But they rate all these different books and all these kind of fad diets they get. But it's
no such thing as your belief for your blood type.
Your blood type has absolutely nothing to do with anything in terms of diet. Absolutely nothing. It is the farthest thing from science that you can possibly get in terms of fad diets. The farthest thing. It is the paragon of pseudoscience.
And he's made $1 million.
And he's rich off of it.
I had another question. You said fish are getting fed to cattle?
Yeah.
How was that?
What they feed cattle is
weird.
It's weird. It's a just conglomeration of all kinds of stuff. They even feed ground up animals like cows.
Concrete. Yeah.
How do they eat it?
Well, they make it into
a meal.
they make it into pellets.
Yeah.
They make it into
concrete, cardboard,
all kinds of weird stuff.
At it and walk away, wouldn't they? But
Yeah.
why not?
But that's all they got.
That's their only option, and you're hungry.
I think they probably.
They probably put stuff to make it taste good, but I mean no, and even they'll even put the euthanized animals, dogs and cats from shelters get ground up and put into cattle feed. I mean all kinds of stuff.
Hence the mad cow disease
Yeah,
epidemic.
just it's horrible what they feed. Yeah.
I'm interested in finding gentle ways of getting this message in.
Aren't we all?
I'm really interested in helping kids, because I think we help kids and it's going to be a lot easier.
I got a lot of.
But it was interesting. I asked Will Tuttle not too long ago. I told him of my interest in wanting to maybe bring this to kids, and I asked him if he had any suggestions, and he says, I don't even go there because then you have to deal with their parents.
Yeah.
He says, that's why I focus.
It's very dangerous. Can I get this one? I
on
got kids.
college people, because they're out of the house and they don't have this parental thing. So
Yeah.
any ideas
Yeah.
on how to
Can I just say something?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Well, on the college level, vegan outreach is awesome. What their whole focus is, I mean, basically the entirety of their organization is creating these really awesome pamphlets, vegan pamphlets. They go out to college campuses all over the country and leaflet. So vegan outreach is awesome for college outreach. But I think that it would be awesome if they were able to take it a step further too and get into some of the college groups, or what do they call it? Little
Clubs.
activities, clubs, those kind of things. There should be a vegetarian club, a vegan club on every campus, but that would be a good way, I think, too. As far as younger kids, though, I don't think it's a problem at all to expose younger kids. Well, maybe we have a differentiation, but I mean, there's a organization called something Humane Education. I can't remember, but their whole thing is bringing plant-based diet to younger kids and showing them how to cook and stuff. I mean, I went vegetarian when I was still in my very, very heavily meat-eating house. And it was empowering, and I felt like it was important, and I did it, even though I had no support from my family and my parents. I don't know that it's that big a deal, but go ahead.
I would say there's an ethical conundrum that you're running into there. First of all, the idea of indoctrinating children kind of is iffy, and then also you could be usurping the parental right to teach their own children their own values, etc. So I think it's definitely a very, very touchy thing to do with kids. I've taught thousands of kids in the last decade or so, and I never tell them what to do, what to eat, or anything like that.
Karate.
And I've taught yoga to them as well. And I actually would never tell my kids, you should be vegetarian or you should be vegan, for two reasons. First of all, I don't think that I think it's unethical to try to indoctrinate children on that level, and I also think that it's unethical to kind of undermine whatever the parents are teaching. But that being said, kids get it really easily. Like in here, I have a rule: no killing, right? So when I see kids playing, kids love to play with bugs. When I see them playing with bugs, I always say, you know, you cannot kill in this building. You never kill here, right? And then somehow or another, all my students know I'm vegetarian and vegan. I have never told them that. I've never told them. They all know that. And a lot of them will come up to me and say, so you don't eat chicken? Why not? And I say, I don't want to kill. You know, so I never phrase it in a way of like, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, you should do that. My beliefs and my way of being are known. If they think I'm a really, really cool guy, then they'll be interested in it and they'll ask questions. If they're, you know, but I really try to respect their ability to formulate their own opinions without trying to indoctrinate, and also being very, very cautious of how you're dealing with the parents, being very respectful of the parents' rights to basically teach their kids. But, you know, I think almost every parent is okay with kids getting a variety of different ideas and letting the kids think about it, you know, just as long as you're not trying to indoctrinate, you know what I mean? It's the same reason why you wouldn't try to persuade people of a very political position when you're a teacher. When you're a teacher, you're taking advantage of that power. So you're given a lot of power as a teacher, and you have to really, really use that responsibly. So,
But I think ought to be getting this information out, though.
Yeah.
Just scholastic.
Rid of the nachos.
Yeah.
well,
but that group that I was talking about, yeah, I mean, they go in and they'll like make a vegan meal and say, this is what vegan is. Here's an option. You know, I don't think they're like saying you should all go vegan. They're just saying, look, this is what vegan is. They're just exposing the kids to it. So, but Patricia, did you have something you wanted to say?
I would like to add a comment to Nora's question. And from my personal background of knowledge is that actually locally there are choices through the school lunch program and very pioneering efforts made here in the Bay Area, not to indoctrinate necessarily, but to have vegan options. And often that is started as a school ground garden, if you will. So depending upon your area, you can always work through the schools, inquire about their school lunch programs. And then nationally, what comes to mind is a group called PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And Dr. Neil Bernard, who's a vegan, heads up that organization. They do fantastic work and also have a component aimed at children as well. So I don't think that organization is so much indoctrination as it truly is looking at a scientific basis and how this is going to support your health, even as a young child, young body.
Yeah. And Farrell?
I just wanted to make a comment. It was said that we're omnivores, and we actually are not omnivores. We're herbivores. We don't have the digestive system. We don't have the body internally or externally to process animal products. So we're really herbivores. That's what our bodies are designed for. That's what our spirit is designed for. That's what our ethics is designed for. And that's how we can be the healthiest.
A teacher once told me about the way our teeth are, because we don't have fangs to like tear off meat off of animals, which is what like cats, lions, all these.
Well, what are primates then?
Primates are omnivores.
So primates are omnivores.
We're technically biologically considered to be omnivores, but and we are better designed. Like I was saying, the nutrients that we need are more holistic in plant sources. But for survival mechanisms, you can eat animal products.
A cow wouldn't survive.
A cow can't.
As much meat as we do.
A cow can't say there's not enough grass. I'm going to go hunt something. But a chimpanzee can do that. For example, and that's what makes us omnivores. It's not to say that either one of the foods is equally good. But it's just to say that we could survive eating something else. So
I remember reading about a dog that was starved to death and was tied to a tree, and there was no food, and it ate the bark off the tree, which is not what a dog would eat.
Yeah.
But the dog was able to eat that because it had nothing else. And so that certainly happened.
Yeah, and if you want to get back to the physiological reasons, there's several other things. There's a ratio of digestive alimentary canal to torso. For example, it's about 4-to-1 in your average carnivorous animal. And the reason being is if you're eating meat putrefies. Leave the meat on the counter for, what does it take, about, I think, 30 hours for food to pass through your entire alimentary canal. Well, if you leave meat on the counter for 30 hours, what's going to happen? It's going to putrefy and stink, and then you get the fermentation fermentation, and you get all these different products that create the erosion of the digestive system, which is why animal products increase risk of digestive cancers, etc. And this is why we need fibers, because the fiber is what the peristaltic movement helps push the food through. For herbivore, it tends to be something like, I think, 10-to-1 or something like that, which is more in line with what we are. So we are much more better designed. Then there's also the colon wall, for example. Carnivorous animals, if you look at their colon, it's very slippery. You know, get the meat in, get it out fast. Again, but with the colon wall with humans and primates, and we have a very it's bubbly. It's like it's got a lot of different movement, a lot of muscular, a lot of places to hold the food in, so that you can uptake the maximum amount of nutrients for it. And this is why, you know, meat's clearly associated with colorectal cancers. It's clearly associated with Crohn's, colitis, diverticulitis, all of these polyps. All of that is a lack of fiber in the diet, and a lot of that is because of the meat. So, I mean, same thing for white grains as well, would be very similar.
Yesterday, a few of us were at Dr. Greger's talk, Dr. Michael Greger of the HSUS, and I thought this was an amazing statistic. He said that half an egg, it's totally not related, but I just thought of it. Half an egg a day. If you eat half an egg a day, you're 3 times as likely to get breast cancer, and 2 times as likely to get like all these other kinds of cancers. Just half an egg a day. And I was like, who eats half an egg a day if they eat eggs? They eat way more than that. It's very interesting. Anyway, yeah.
I think it's a very important question. I think one of our presentations probably will be here on this very issue of vegan nutrition, and as you know, we'll go over surveys and everything. We'll go to a whole presentation of that.
Yeah, focused on nutrition, sure. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's kind of a weird question. It's kind of like a philosophical question. I don't know if we'll be able to answer it, but I just was thinking, it's like, how's a way we can think, like, being vegan, I know that every time, you know, we make those choices, we're helping animals, but, like, I want to see that I'm helping the animal. Like, if you're standing there and you're ordering, and you don't order the pig, I want to see that pig alive, and living the rest of its life. But, you know, been vegan 6.5 years, and I still don't know that an animal is better off because of that. And that's what gets hard, like when you just can't handle it all, you know?
Well, it'd be way worse if you were eating the pig.
Yeah, but like, how do you
think of it in terms of supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
If there's no demand, then, because the thing is, when you say, like, if you're not ordering the pig, that means there was a pig waiting for you, you know, to be slaughtered, right? That you didn't order.
You saved that too.
Yeah. But the reverse.
It's cerebral.
Where there shouldn't be
it's very cerebral.
But I totally recommend doing what you already do, Karen Stanley, and that's going to Brighthaven and going to these places where you can interact. And I think that's a hugely spiritual thing to do, is to be able to pet the animals and be with them, look in their eyes, look at their souls, watch their emotional reactions when they see you. You know, acknowledge that they're as complex emotionally as we are, you know, and I think that is the way to do it. And then you think, you know, less animals were killed because of me. I would say that's the way to make the connection.
Angie, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, it always reminds me that we may not see the change, you know, in our lifetimes, but we still have to do it. You know, we still have to be responsible for whatever it is, whether it's, you know, for animals or for whatever you stand for. I think you just have to trust that is going to have that impact, and you just have to keep doing it anyway. You know.
Thanks a lot, you guys.